looks at me. He said, well, what would you like to know? I said, I'd like to know how I can get it. And Jerry said, oh, you want my deal? I said, yeah, I want your deal. And Jerry said, well, you can have it. It's the first one I ever won, Rick. I swear to you, Terry, maybe you know the feeling, but I'd not won any at that point. I went back to my room. I'm high-fiving myself. I never heard back from Jerry on that one, I'll tell you. The guy was bigger than life. He's the best combination of brains and brawn I've ever met. I mean, think about it. Most of us in sales, our responsibility is to teach someone how to go out and make a presentation. We were talking about it last night. You can't teach anyone the courage. A lot of us played sports and it takes certain courage to do some things. But I got to tell you, when you're sitting in your car and you've got an insurance kit in your hand and you got to open the door to that car and you got to walk up to that door and you got to knock on that door. And if you're lucky enough that they're there and then they let you in, then you've got to maneuver them to the kitchen table. Then you've got to make a presentation. It's mind-boggling. Tom's looking at me like nothing to it. Well, Jerry Vanderhorst, he came into our business and he took over this product called Safe Drivers and this division called Instant Issue. I mean, it had been sitting on the shelf for years until Jerry, I told Stanley Barrow, well, I can do that. And then he did this insane thing. He said, we're going to build it around 16 presentations a day. Now, I just told you what it's like to do one. Imagine the thought of having to do that 16 times every day. So the first time they asked me about it, like I get a vote, right? I said, that's nuts. Built the biggest sales organization in the United States of America. Stanley Byers said to me one day, he said, you still don't believe it, do you? I said, I can't believe it. I don't believe anybody can make 16 presentations a day. The chairman of the board of the company, Jerry was vice chairman in those days. They were a great partnership, weren't they, Rick? He said to me, I want you to get in your car. I want you to drive to Indianapolis. I want you to go over and see Tom and Rick, and I want you to go to the field and spend one day with either one of them. So I got in my car, I go to Indianapolis. Tom says, come on, you're coming with me today. At 9 o'clock, we left the office. Tom says to me, I don't know what's going to happen today, Steve, but when we're finished tonight about 7 o'clock, you will have seen 16 presentations. And at 7 o'clock that night, we had made 16 presentations. He'd made 8 sales. You see, Jerry was bigger than life. Once Jerry had figured out by sharpening those pencils, once he had figured out that's what it took, it didn't matter to him how much effort was involved. It took 16 presentations to make X number of sales for a salesperson to earn a living, and so the rule was 16 presentations. Bigger than life. He taught me how to become a businessman. This migration to Naples, Florida, you hear so much about. See Leighton Elliott and Bobby. Welcome to the club, you guys. It all started right here. Her and me, 1989. Today, the magic number of the number of couples who have followed us somehow, the domino effect, I'm not saying they all came down there because of Steve and Kathy, is 78, of which I'm proud that Jerry and Janet were amongst that club. On behalf of all of us who earn our living with a presentation kit in our hands, I am proud to tell you, we're not here. We certainly haven't accomplished what we accomplished without Jerry Vanderhorst. Dave's right. He loved us. He took care of us every day. Kathy and I are real lucky. We were down in Naples towards the end, and I'll never forget just 3 Sundays, I think, before Jerry passed away. Kathy and I were over with Jerry, and game is on, and he's talking, and Rick's on the bed and talking like he always does, and Jerry's kind of doing Muhammad Ali, trying to get him, I'm going to get him. And Kathy, who I'm very proud of, is the hospice volunteer of the year 2 years ago in the state of Missouri, and she's saying all the right things. She's holding his hand, and I'm thinking, you know what? I don't know how it happened or when it happened, but as a couple, we fell in love with this man, and we fell in love with his wife. We're the luckiest people on the face of the earth. We will make him proud. We will continue to build our company. in his memory. Rick and Terry, and I can't tell you how much it means to me, we've moved into some new offices in St. Louis, and the first thing that they told me they wanted to do was to have Jerry's trophy, the Eagle, come to St. Louis and be in the headquarters. And when the first time I walked in the office, I saw this spot, and I said, it's a perfect place for it. It's right where it has to be. And I know that the process has already begun to have that shipped to St. Louis so that we can have it. It means every single morning I walk in that office, the first person I'm going to think about is J.P. Vanderhorst. And there isn't anything that would make me prouder and make me happier. Thanks for letting us share a little time with you today. To all of you back there, we got a big job to do. I appreciate your support, but let's get it done. Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Terry. Thanks, everybody. So on.
Thanks, Steve. You know, I sat down because we're down to the last speaker, me. And I told my brother Terry that when I get up here, I'll get a standing ovation. And he said, there's no way. Now watch this. Mom, can you come up for just a minute, please? Come on up. Come on up. Talking that thing right there.
Okay. I certainly cannot follow all the speakers beforehand, and they said everything I want to say. So I do want to thank each and every one of you for coming to today's memorial. This is one of the things that Jerry really wanted, and he said, and I want you to do a great job on it, so I hope I did a great job. Even though we live in Florida, that's because the weather's nicer than up here, you know that. And Jerry could not get around anymore because he's been in a wheelchair for about 4 years. And I took care of him at home because he did not want to go to a nursing home. He said, do not put me in a nursing home. So I got the equipment I needed to take care of him at home right up until 4 days before he died when he went to hospice. And I'm very proud of what I did, and only God helped me to do it, that's for sure. One of the things that he enjoyed most in the last 3 or 4 years we were down there is listening to the football games and the basketball games by way of Mike Kelly and Larry Hanskin for the football and Bucky Bockhorn and Larry Hanskin. And we were glued to the computer. Now, I'm not computer literate, but I do know how to get WHIO Radio Live. And we listened, and that brought Dayton close to us because Jerry was unable to travel anymore. And that was his biggest thing, that he couldn't walk anymore, and it was hard on him. But he kept good spirits. A real example of that is 5 days before he died, I had gotten him up out of bed, and he sat down and he slumped way over, and I thought, oh my God, he's dying right now. And I called 911, and we took him to the hospital, and I followed about 10 minutes later. I walked into the room, and here he's flirting with all the nurses. I mean, so what do you do? But anyhow, he loved life, he lived it to its fullest, and he made everything wonderful for the family and us. When we started out and first got married, we only had $125 to our name. We lived on love, you know. And but then he worked hard, and with God's help, here we are. Thank you very, very much for coming. It was such a joy to see everybody. And I know that he's up there watching and enjoying it too. Thank you very, very much.
Great. Thanks, Mom. I also, before I get started, I want to thank Bob Stackler, Chuck Hewer, Tom DeLuca, All you guys have been such great friends from St. Mary's, and Tom has been such a inspiration for helping us through a lot of this, and it's really great to have you guys here to share the day with us. When about Christmas time, I walked into the house one day, and my daughter Elizabeth's there. And she walks up to me as I come through the front door, and she goes, Mom just told us that she loves us more than you. And I said, what? And James comes out and he goes, oh yeah, she said it. She loves us more than you. And I looked at Leslie and I said, Leslie, what is going on? And she's like, I love you. I love the kids too. And I got to tell you something though. If you asked my dad who he loved more, he would say, your mother. Straight out. I can always have more kids. There's only one Janet. That's the way it was. As is evidenced by Jerry and Steve showing up at the end. The fact is that my dad could never have loved anyone more than he loved my mom. It's not possible. It's not possible. They were completely devoted to each other. And Mom referred to the last 4 years when Dad was in a wheelchair, and Leslie and I sat down on many occasions and said, Mom, what are you doing? No one can do this. And she would say to me, Jesus is there to help me. Don't worry about it. And I sat down and I looked at a relationship that was completely built in love, and it moved from absolute commitment to dedication, and then towards the end, it became inspiration. You sit down and you watch the way that my mom was there for my father. And by the way, my sister-in-laws, my brothers, my sister, all of them were great. But the way that my mom was there to help him, and the way that he just glowed whenever she walked into the room, the way that he looked at her, it became inspirational. It was something that you sat down and said to yourself, I have got to try to love my spouse. I've got to try to love somebody as much as my dad loved my mom. And Mom, it was inspirational, believe me. We really appreciated it. I have 6 brothers. I've got 4 brother and sister-in-laws. I've got 11, Mom had 11 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. And the thing that always amazed me the most is if you got them alone privately, every one of them would say, well, you know, I'm actually Grandpa's favorite. I'm actually Dad's favorite, you know. Every kid thought that they were Dad's favorite. And that was his magic. The fact is, his gift was the ability to connect with you on a private level. He was always mentoring, always guiding you, always helping you out, even to the very end. When Mom talked about the day that Dad went down, she called me. I was at breakfast with Steve, and she said, I think we've lost your dad. And we went screaming to the hospital. We showed up there. He was flirting with the nurses. Okay. And we walk in, and my dad, because he was always mentoring, always guiding you, my daughter Elizabeth walked up. She's standing next to him. She puts his hand on his arm and says, Grandpa, I'm here. And my dad opened his eyes, and he looked at her, and he said, get a man. And my sister-in-law, Maria, is standing there, and she goes, did he just say get a man? And I'm like, I think he did. But that was my dad. That was my dad. All the way to the end, he was there to give you advice, trust me. The last couple weeks, we were sitting there, and by the way, this was a inspirational process. We really saw him passing through. I know that in the last couple weeks, he was having conversations with Chip and Marie, his mom and dad, and so I know that they were there to greet him and meet him. I know how much he loved Mom's grandparents, Albert and Hilda. Albert, for those of you that don't know it, was the guy that actually introduced my father to cigars, okay? Hilda, my grandmother, if you talk to my dad, he will tell you that nobody in the history of the world has done more to destroy the English language than my grandmother Hilda. He loved to tell the story of when he and Mom were first married. They get into a car and they're driving with my grandparents up to Sandusky, Ohio. It's a Sunday morning. They go through one of these small little towns. They pull onto the main street, and about 4 blocks up, you see these 2 little old gals with their Bibles, and they're getting ready to cross the street to go to the church on the other side. And they see my dad coming, and they step back up on the curb. And they patiently wait as my dad drives the 4 blocks to pass them. And as he passes them, my grandmother taps him on the shoulder and says, Jerry, don't you know that Presbyterians have the right of way? And she was amazing. I'm sure they're with him too. My dad, because we talked about all this, my dad said, that you got to do me one favor. And I said, what's that? And he said, do not tell that joke. There's a joke, and he said, you cannot tell the joke. Brother Fitz is in the crowd. You cannot tell the joke. So here goes. The Pope is sitting in his office in the Vatican, and a nun walks into his office and says, Your Holiness, there's a gentleman here from St. Louis, Missouri, that says that he needs to see you. And the Pope says, well, bring him in. So the guy comes in, and he introduces